They told you what this place was. They said, oil. They said, desert. They said, rules carved in scripture and towers built from petroleum dreams. They were not wrong, but they were not close to right either. Because beneath the glass and the gold, beneath the highways that scar the ancient sand, something older waits. Something that has no name in any modern language. Something that predates the very idea of a kingdom. Forgotten gods carved their faces into these cliffs before civilization had the arrogance to call itself civilized. Gates were built for prayers we can no longer pronounce. And in certain valleys, at certain hours, the silence is so complete, so geological, that you begin to understand. Saudi Arabia is not a country, it is a palimpsest, layer upon layer of memory, pressed into sandstone and salt, flat and sacred marble, each era writing over the last, none of them ever truly erased. This is the story of a kingdom that was never only one thing, and the sand, which does not hide, preserves. Everything the world forgot, this land kept. Riyadh. Say the name slowly. Let it sit in the mouth like a word from another age. Because that is what it is. A name older than the kingdom it now anchors. Older than the towers that puncture its sky. Older, perhaps, than the very idea of a capital city. And yet, look up. ALMA'A. The kingdom center tower rises above the city like a steel crown. Its aperture open to the sky, a frame within a frame, a window through which the heavens pass unchallenged. It is not simply a skyscraper. It is a punctuation mark in the atmosphere. A declaration made in glass and ambition. The desert, ancient, sovereign, unbowed, saying we are still here, but now we reach. But the desert does not submit to steel. It flows beneath it, through the cracks in the concrete, through these street names that still carry the memory of tribes long before there were streets to name. Through these souks where saffron and oud smoke drift between glass malls and ancient mosques, indifferent to the century written on the calendar. In Riyadh, time does not move in one direction. It spirals. The nomad still walks beneath the neon. The caravan still moves beneath the asphalt. You cannot build a city tall enough to escape the memory of the land beneath it. The desert was here before the first brick was laid, and the desert will remain when the glass is returned to sand. And if you follow that memory, if you trace it back to its source, you arrive eventually at mud. Diriyah, at Turayf, before the towers, before the oil wells, before the kingdom had a name the world could recognize. There was this: earth and straw, clay shaped by hand, walls that have absorbed the sun for 300 years and still refuse to dissolve. This is where the Saudi state drew its first breath. In the mid-18th century, an alliance was forged in these sun-baked corridors that would define the destiny of an entire peninsula. Scholars walked these alleys. Warriors planned campaigns in these courtyards. Merchants built fortunes from rooms of compressed earth that a single rainstorm could theoretically unmake. Stand here now and breathe it in. The smell is specific. Sun-baked clay, a trace of old wood, something faintly sweet, like bread left too long in a hot room. It is the smell of beginning, of something enormous, gestating quietly in the dust. UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site in 2010. But for Saudis, The designation was almost beside the point. This place was always sacred, long before any international body arrived to confirm what the people already knew in their bones. Every empire needs a wound it refuses to close. For Saudi Arabia, Diriyah is that wound, the origin point it returns to again and again when it needs to remember what it is beneath all the glass and velocity and ambition. From these fractured walls, a nation whispered itself into being. And no kingdom, no matter how tall, no matter how modern, can exist without knowing the sound of its first word. But a nation is more than its monuments, more than its towers and its ruins. A nation breathes, and every living thing needs a lung. Wadi Hanifa, 120 kilometers of quiet contradiction. A ribbon of green threading through a city of beige. Life insisting on itself in a landscape engineered to forget it. Once, caravans followed this valley. Long before Riyadh was a capital, before it was anything at all, this water sustained the settlements that came before everything else. Farmers read the seasons by how the reeds moved. Merchants rested on its banks. Pilgrims drank from it before the long march inland toward the holy cities. Then the city grew, and the valley choked. Waste and neglect erased the green. The water turned dark. The birds left in silence. And then, slowly, deliberately, the restoration began. Not with the violence of construction, but with the patient grammar of repair. Wetlands rebuilt from almost nothing. Waters cleaned season by season. Birds returning in cautious flocks, as if uncertain they are truly welcome back. Wadi Hanifa is not a park. Do not make that mistake. It is memory, restored to itself. A city reminding itself that before the concrete came, something older and quieter lived here, and that it was worth saving. That the tallest tower still draws its water from somewhere deeper than ambition. That every civilization, no matter how loud, rests on something it did not build. In the land of the sovereign desert, where the dust of empires is simply dust, and the sand remembers everything, even the greatest kingdom must eventually return to the valley and listen. Before language, before scripture, before any god had been given a name to answer to, there was this, stone, and the hand that found it irresistible. In the shadow of the Nafud desert, at the foot of Jabal Sinman, near the ancient town of Jabba, the oldest conversation in Arabia is still happening. You only have to know how to listen. Petroglyphs, carved into dark sandstone with tools of bone and flint. Some of them 9,000 years old. Perhaps older. The desert does not offer certainty, only depth. These are not decorations. Do not call them that. They are archives. Testimonies written in the only medium available to people who had not yet invented the idea of writing. Here, a hunt in progress. Men with bows drawn, their bodies frozen in mid-stride for 9 millennia and counting. There, an ostrich, caught at the precise moment of running, its stride so accurate you could identify the species without a caption. Camels, not yet domesticated. Wild, unbroken, enormous, moving through the frame of stone as if the artist were trying to hold something they already sensed was fleeting. No ruler commissioned this. No court ordered it. No theologian sanctioned it. These images belong to the moment before power, before any human being had learned to organize other human beings into hierarchies of obedience. They are the product of pure witness. Someone looked at the world, found it staggering, and pressed that staggerment into rock. Arabia did not wait for history to arrive from elsewhere. It made its own before the world was watching, before the trade routes came, before the gods were given temples rather than cliffs. UNESCO recognized Jabal Sinman as a site of universal significance. But universal significance existed here 9,000 years before the phrase was coined. The rock knew. It held the record without being asked. Walk slowly past the carvings at the right hour, when the sun is low and the shadows are long, and you will feel it. Not history. Something older than history. The geological murmur of a species in the act of recognizing itself, of saying, we were here, we moved, we hunted, we looked at the sky and felt something enormous that we could not name. They carved the feeling instead, and the stone kept it, faithfully, without complaint, for 9,000 years and counting. The world forgets that Saudi Arabia has mountains. That surprises people. It shouldn't. In the highlands of the Asir region, where the air is cool enough to raise goosebumps on skin accustomed to sea level heat, there is a village that was never meant to be forgotten. RIJAL ALMA'A. The name means the men of the bright valley, and the name does not exaggerate. Perched on the edge of a ridge that looks down to a valley of improbable green, this village was, for centuries, a vital hinge in the geography of trade. The point where the southern Arabian Peninsula breathed through. The corridor connecting inland caravans with the Red Sea, with Mecca, with the slow arterial commerce of a world constantly in motion. But RIJAL ALMA'A was never merely functional. It was, from its very foundations, art. Every house here is a fortress and a gallery simultaneously, built to resist the mountain weather, the occasional raid, the slow attrition of time, and built to inspire, painted inside and out with a visual language specific to this place, to these women, to this altitude, and this light. Al-Khat al-Asiri, the geometric tradition that lives on these walls. Oh, it is not decoration in the casual sense. It is inscription. It is identity compressed into pattern. Mothers painted it onto the walls before daughters were born who would learn to paint it themselves. The chain of transmission unbroken until the villages emptied, until the young moved toward the cities, until the walls began to fade. But RIJAL ALMA'A refused. The people who remained and the people who returned refused to let the fading finish. The restoration here was not the work of a government ministry, not primarily. It was the work of people who understood that a building is not just a building, that a wall is not just a wall, that what is painted on stone is also painted on memory, and that when the paint goes, something in the people goes with it. Today, UNESCO has recognized what the Asir Highlands have always known. RIJAL ALMA'A is nominated. The village is alive, not in the museum sense, not preserved under glass, but breathing, inhabited, generating its own future from its own deep past. Stand at its edge in the late afternoon, when the cloud drops into the valley below and the village rises above the mist, like something that refused to sink, and you will understand. There are places that exist as proof. Proof that beauty is not fragile, that it can be built into the side of a mountain, painted onto the inside of a stone room, transmitted quietly from one set of hands to another, and survive. Centuries of wind, politics, and the relentless modern erosion of everything local and specific. It can survive all of that, and still shine. There are places on this earth that belong to everyone, and there are places that belong to something beyond everyone. Mecca is the second kind. It is the spiritual gravitational center of 1.5 billion lives. From every direction, from every longitude and latitude on the surface of this planet, 5 times each day, 1.5 billion people orient themselves toward this point. This city, this stone, not metaphorically, literally. The mathematics of prayer requires it. The body must face the Kaaba, which means the Kaaba is always present, always quietly commanding the geometry of 1 billion daily lives, whether they are in Lagos or Jakarta, in Oslo or Sao Paulo. The stone at the center of Mecca is the most consistently faced object in human history. At the center of the Grand Mosque, surrounded by marble and prayer, by grief and gratitude and surrender, stands the Kaaba. A cube, a single cube of stone wrapped in black silk, small enough that you could walk its perimeter in 2 minutes at a gentle pace. And yet, it is the axis upon which 1.5 billion souls orient their daily existence, the point to which every prayer is addressed, not the destination of faith. Faith is not a destination, but the direction of it, the compass bearing, the fixed point around which everything else, cosmologically, personally, spiritually, rotates. What makes a place holy? It is not the architecture. The Grand Mosque is extraordinary. Its white colonnades, its layered geometry, its capacity to hold hundreds of thousands of worshippers and still, somehow, feel intimate. It is not the scale. Scale is a human achievement, and human achievements are, finally, countable. What makes Mecca holy is what the people bring to it. Every person who arrives carries something invisible and immense. Grief nursed for years in private. Hope so fragile it has never been spoken aloud. Gratitude for surviving something that should have been unsurvivable. The specific weight of a life, its accumulation of love and loss, and the 10,000 small bewilderments of being alive. They bring all of it here. They set it in motion around the Kaaba. And something happens in the circling that cannot be measured or explained, only experienced. The Kaaba has stood through empires, through storms that would have dissolved anything less certain of its purpose, through sieges and restorations and the terrible friction of centuries. It has been rebuilt, rewrapped, circled by every language and every skin and every variety of human suffering and human joy that this earth has produced. It endures. Not because it is indestructible. Stone is not indestructible, but because the devotion that surrounds it is. Each step around it is a link in a chain that stretches back 14 centuries. Each prayer a pulse in a current that has never flatlined. Devotion, here, more than anywhere, is not a metaphor. It is a physical force. It moves in the bodies of the people, circling in the heat. It rises with the steam of breath in the early morning air above the mosque. It collects in the space between one whispered prayer and the next. This is what the Kaaba holds. Not gold, not power, not politics. The accumulated sincerity of 1.5 billion living people and the 14 centuries of the dead who came before them, converging on a single point of black silk and ancient stone. That is not a small thing. That is perhaps the largest thing on earth. North of Mecca, across the sun-burnished plains through the patient geography of the Hejaz, lies a city where devotion does not erupt in tides. It settles, it accumulates. It becomes, slowly and permanently, the texture of the air itself. Medina, the city of the Prophet. If Mecca is the direction of faith, Medina is its memory. Not the memory of doctrine or scripture, those belong everywhere to everyone. The memory of a man, of specific streets and specific dates, and the specific weight of a life lived in the full view of history. Al-Masjid an-Nabawi, the Prophet's mosque, built by Muhammad himself in the 7th century, not commissioned, not delegated, built with his own hands alongside his companions on a plot of land in a city that had just received him as a refugee. A mosque that began as a simple courtyard of palm trunks and clay, that has grown across 14 centuries of expansion and renovation into one of the largest and most visited buildings on the surface of the earth. Beneath the green dome, a color that has come to mean in Islamic visual culture almost everything, rests the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad. Alongside him, Abu Bakr and Umar, his closest companions, the first and second caliphs of the faith. For millions who travel here each year, standing before this sacred chamber, not a touristic experience. Do not make that reduction. It is the culmination of something that began for many in childhood. In a grandmother's house, in a school where the Prophet's name was spoken with a specific intonation that lodged in the body and never left. They arrive here having carried that name and the weight of what it means, across oceans and decades and private reckonings with faith. And then they stand, and they offer their blessings, and the air, warm, close, thick with the prayers of 1,000 years, receives them. The mosque's prayer halls can hold hundreds of thousands in Ramadan. During the Hajj season, Medina becomes something that has no precise parallel in human experience. A city briefly inhabited by the largest intentional gathering of human beings organized around a single shared impulse. Not war, not commerce, not spectacle, devotion. Intricate calligraphy runs the length of every wall, gold on white, white on green, the Arabic script that carries the words of the faith in a form so refined it has become architecture in itself. Soft carpets receive the prostrations of the faithful. The rhythm of congregational prayer, the precise, synchronized movement of 10,000 bodies bowing and rising in unison, is both choreography and theology. This is where faith became a city, where a revelation became a community, where the idea of a single God speaking to a single man in a cave above Mecca became, through the specific gravity of this place and this man, a civilization. Radiant in stone and light and accumulated devotion, Al-Masjid an-Nabawi endures, not as museum, not as monument, but as a living argument that the past is never fully past. That a man who died 14 centuries ago can still, through the architecture of faith, draw millions to stand quietly in his presence, and find, in that standing, something they could not have named until they arrived. There are cities built by human hands, and then there are cities built by time, shaped by wind and water and the slow insistence of geological patience, into which human beings eventually arrived and understood immediately that they were guests. Hijra is the second kind, known also as Madain Salish, the cities of Salish. This place was carved from living sandstone by the Nabatean civilization more than 2,000 years ago. The same people who built Petra across the border in Jordan. The same people who understood, with a precision no subsequent civilization has matched, that the most permanent architecture is not constructed on top of the landscape. It is excavated from within it. Over 100 monumental tombs rise from these cliffs, each one commissioned, each one inscribed with the name of its occupant, a merchant, a dignitary, a woman of standing, and warnings to anyone who might desecrate what was built. The inscriptions are still legible. The warnings still carry weight. Hijra was not merely a necropolis. It was a vital lung in the ancient incense trade, the route that connected Arabia with Egypt, with Mesopotamia, with the Mediterranean world that consumed frankincense and myrrh, with an appetite that shaped the economics of an entire hemisphere. Caravans moved through these canyons carrying the compressed resin of trees that grew nowhere else on earth. The smell of Arabia, exported, traded, burned on altars from Rome to Alexandria, passed through this exact corridor of sandstone. The desert kept it. 2,000 years of wind and heat, and the particular indifference of deep time. And yet the facades hold. The inscriptions remain. The eagles carved above the tomb entrances still spread their wings in the morning light. In 2008, Saudi Arabia offered Hijra to the world as its first UNESCO World Heritage Site. The first, as if the country had finally decided to allow the world access to what the sand had been preserving all along. Nearby, Alula breathes alongside Hijra. Living valley, palm groves, sandstone formations sculpted by wind into shapes that resist all description. Where mud brick villages have been restored not as museums, but as habitations, as places where the present tense is still valid. This is what the empty quarter cannot offer. The empty quarter, Rab al-Khali, the largest continuous sand desert on Earth, stretching across a quarter of the Arabian Peninsula in a silence so absolute it constitutes a kind of argument. Life is not possible here. And yet, the stars are. The stars and the wind that shapes the dunes through the night into forms that will be gone by the following evening. The impermanence is the point. In a land that keeps everything, the empty quarter keeps nothing. It is the counter-argument, the void against which all the preservation makes sense. They are not opposites, Hijra and the empty quarter. They are the same sentence, spoken twice, once in stone, once in sand. The stone says, "We were here. We had names. We carved them into the cliff so deeply that 2,000 years of weather could not reach them." The sand says, "Nothing lasts. Not the dune, not the caravan, not the name on the tomb." The wind takes everything, eventually, and redistributes it elsewhere. Both are true. Saudi Arabia holds both truths simultaneously, without flinching. We began with forgotten gods and gates built for prayers. No living mouth remembers how to speak. We said the sand does not hide, it preserves. We meant it. And now, having traveled the length and depth of this country, the way from the petroglyphs of Jubba to the tombs of Hegra, from the mud cradle of Diriyah to the marble axis of Mecca, we can say what we meant more precisely. Saudi Arabia is the world's great keeper of the before. Before the towers, before the oil, before the kingdom had a name that fit neatly on a map, before any of the categories we now use to reduce this place to something manageable, something we think we already understand. Before all of that, there was a human hand pressing against dark stone. There was a woman painting geometric truth onto the interior wall of a mountain house. There was a caravan resting in the shadow of a sandstone tomb 2,000 years ago, smelling the frankincense it carried and understanding, without needing to articulate it, that it was passing through something ancient and extraordinary. That understanding is still available here. It has not been paved over. It has not been exported, sold, or rationalized into irrelevance. Beneath the glass towers of Riyadh, beneath the highways and the neon and the velocity of a nation rewriting its own future at a speed that takes the breath away, the geological murmur continues. The petroglyphs still carry their 9,000-year conversation. The mud walls of Diriyah still hold the first words of a nation. The Kaaba still commands the geometry of 1.5 billion daily lives. The question this country asks, if you are willing to hear it, is the oldest question available to any civilization standing at the intersection of its past and its future. What do you keep? Not as artifact, not as heritage site with laminated signage and a gift shop at the exit, but as living knowledge. As the thing that tells you who you are when the towers are dark and the oil is silent and the only light comes from the stars that the Bedouin navigated by for 1,000 years before anyone thought to build a road. The sand is the answer. The sand which seems to erase, which takes the dune and redistributes it, which swallows the caravan track and the fallen wall and the forgotten name, is actually the most faithful archivist on earth. It keeps everything below the surface, below the reach of the wind, where the heat cannot penetrate and the century cannot arrive. Saudi Arabia is that sand. A country that appears to the impatient eye to be only its present moment, its towers, its ambitions, its gleaming reinvention of itself. But press your hand against the stone here, the way someone pressed theirs 9,000 years ago, and you will feel it. The warmth is not only the sun, it is the accumulated heat of every civilization that passed through this corridor of history and left something behind. Every prayer spoken toward this soil, every caravan that rested in the shadow of these cliffs, every name carved into sandstone by someone who understood that the only argument against oblivion is specificity, the insistence on leaving, somewhere, some trace that says, I was particular. I was here. I was not only dust. The gates of the forgotten gods are still standing. We simply forgot how to open them. And this country, slowly, on its own terms, at its own sovereign pace, is learning to remember.